Hey everybody, Brian Jackson here with another episode of Friends of Brry. I just met this friend and she's on here today. And so if you liked what we talked about last week, we talked about mental health and mental illness and basically, good things. But I kind of want to take that to the next level. And here's what we're talking about next level here is I want to talk about mental illness and mental health and relationships. I want to talk about boundaries. And I want to talk about like practical things that you can do in your relationship. And I found the right person to talk to. It's my new friend. Her name's Lindsay Walden. And I hope I said that right. She is from Louisiana, but now she lives in St. Louis. And she's, you might pick up on a little accent. I did at first, but I shouldn't have told. But anyways, here's my friend, and thanks for tuning in. Lindsay Walden. How are you today, Lindsay?
I am doing pretty good. I feel like, some days are real smooth and everything goes the way I want it to go. Some days I kind of feel like I'm running around with about 87 things going on at once, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Today's one of those days, though.
I like it. I like it. Would you say you're a more chill person or like a busy bee? Which one makes you focus? Because I know there's certain people who I'm like, they can't focus unless it's all calm. But me, I like the stress. It gets me going, it gets me flowing, and I'm just like, good.
Yeah, I sort of like a combo of both. Like I've often joked, that I have a really interesting mixture of OCD and ADHD, which allows me to do a bunch of different things, but to do them in a really full, deep way, which sometimes can be overwhelming. So I will have to sort of pause and reset. It's part of the reason I am so passionate about self-care and the importance of kind of recovering and recharging your own batteries. But I would say I'm more of a go and do and have lots of things at one time happening. It just sort of makes my brain feel more alive and just more happy.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I'm thankful that there's more people out there like me,
Oh yeah.
the busybody thing. So my aunt who used to live down in the bayou, as they say, wants to know what part of Louisiana are you from?
Yeah, so I grew up actually in the real northern part of the state. It's a small town kind of in the dead center of the north part called Monroe, Louisiana. And I lived there for pretty much, I think like 6 months of age all the way until I went to college. Moved about 45 minutes away to go to a school there in Louisiana. And then after graduation, relocated to St. Louis and just kind of decided to make this my home. So I've been in St. Louis now since 2000, I guess like 2004, 2005.
Gotcha. I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at the fact that you said you're from Monroe, Louisiana, because she lived in West Monroe.
There you
So
go.
the Duck Dynasty.
Such a
So
small world.
did you
That
go to
is
high school with anybody from Duck Dynasty?
No, I think my dad did though. So my dad actually grew up in West Monroe and then moved to Monroe somewhere like around high school time. So I'm pretty sure if he didn't go to school with them, I know he played ball with some of them. And yeah, that's a big deal down there. It's kind of like these local celebrities that still live in the areas. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, she also wants to say she worked at CenturyLink, which is
Yep,
huge in that area.
it is. It
So
is. Kind
anyway, so
of funny, yeah.
but yeah, good old Louisiana fun. Um, I've only been to New Orleans, as they say down there, and I've only been to like Shreveport. So those are the two areas in Louisiana I've been
Mhm.
to. But back to you, I just want to kind of give people a background. First off, where did you go to so not high school because you're not from St. Louis, but where did you go to college? What's your background? Where you at now with your practice, and what brings us together?
Just all of the things. Okay, so let me see.
All the things.
I'll give you the quick rundown as quick as I can. I when I moved to St. Louis, I had just graduated with my undergraduate degree in merchandising and marketing and business, and really thought that I was going to work in corporate America, and actually spent about 5 years in the corporate world when I first moved to the St. Louis area. And it was during that time that I first went to therapy to try and figure out some trauma that I had gone through, and just to sort of sort out my life. I had never done the whole therapy thing, and so it was kind of a whole new world for me. But pretty much within about 6 months of being in therapy, I realized not only how much it was helping me and just life, but I also saw how much of it I was using in my day-to-day work. If it was, working with colleagues, or, running meetings, or trying to understand where people were coming from. And I just really, I don't know, it just, the idea of helping people in a real deep way like that just really spoke to my soul. So I decided back in, I guess it was 2005, 2006, somewhere in that range, to go back and pursue my master's in professional counseling. I went to Lindenwood University here in St. Charles, and I went through there. Well, I went through it pretty quick. I did the master's program in just over 2 years, and was able to pretty much from the get-go, I knew I wanted to work with survivors of trauma. And the whole idea of couples therapy and relationships really fascinated me. So I took a few courses, like elective courses, while I was going to school, specifically in how to work with couples. And it was like something in my brain just clicked on. It was like, that's what I want to do. I have a lot of areas of interest and specialty, but that was the one that like really stood out for me. So I went ahead and finished my degree, or my master's degree, and had done my internship work in private practice. So I had kind of that business experience from my undergrad mixed with this master's degree to kind of allow me to, run my own show, so to speak, but then also, help people in a real deep way. So I was doing that and decided I really wanted to get more training in the areas of relationships and sexual health, because it seemed like no matter the couple dynamic that walked in my office, and I would say about 75% of my practice was comprised of couples, and pretty much still has been, sex always came up as a concern or a topic or something that the couple wanted to focus on. So I went ahead and did a postgraduate year-long certification program to actually get training as a sex therapist. And so that kind of led me down that path of specialty. And for the better part of the last 15 years now, I have been working as a therapist in private practice, specializing in couples and relationships. A few other things I touch on kind of more generally, but the specialty being couples and relationships. And over the years have added a variety of other titles to what I do. In addition to just the straight therapy, right? Just come in, have a session, come back next week, that kind of thing. I have also started offering more coaching and consulting work for couples and individuals that are struggling with relationships or communication. I have a number of online workshops that I've created. I write a weekly blog. I host a weekly podcast, do a lot of media stuff within the St. Louis area, just trying to get the word out, that it is possible to live your best life. It is possible to have a healthy, functioning, happy relationship. It takes work and it takes effort, but, just trying to use the platforms I have to educate as much as I can. I call it infotainment because it's fun and entertaining, but also informational. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Like that. I might use that, but I'll coin you as the founder of that.
Okay, sounds good.
So, I mean, that's what this show is all about, is information, but it's hopefully entertaining. I like to be more informational than entertaining.
I kind of lean in that direction too. I get you.
So recently, though, so last week I had a friend who actually wanted to start off as a life coach, and I feel recently, correct me if I'm wrong, recently meaning in like the last year or two, you've kind of made that transition to do more coaching versus therapy. And if you can walk people a little bit through
Mm-hmm.
The difference between therapy and being a therapist, licensed counselor, and a life coach, which I am as well. And shout out to Lisa Jenkins.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So I feel like there's a lot of overlap in these two fields as well as a lot of differences. And so for me, I will probably always have a small therapy private practice where I do see people that are needing more like what I'll call intensive care. And I don't mean that in like they're really messed up. I mean that in that they might want to be in the therapy process for a long period of time. They want to feel like there's room to process and maybe go through some diagnostics to understand symptoms or, what they're struggling with or, partnering with a number of psychiatrists and making sure if they're like on medication that the medication is doing what it needs to do. So I'll probably always have at least a handful of people that I work with in that realm. But what I discovered is that, well, it's probably been about 3 years ago now. I had been in therapy, off and on for a lot of years and stumbled upon a life coach that I really felt like was drawn to. So I signed up to have a few sessions and I realized that what I had been doing for so many years as a therapist was actually kind of a combination of therapy and coaching. So I've sort of used the term like it's theracoaching because it's kind of a combination of both. But the real difference that I see, at least the way I do it, is that the coaching and consulting work is normally a like shorter stay in the helping dynamic. It's like, come in, get an action plan. We come up with some strategy and then you go and implement it and do the work. And if you need to come back for like a checkup, then we do that. But we kind of have the understanding that, you're going to be real action oriented in the process. Not everyone is at that point, though. And I think that's the reason that there's a real delineation between therapy and coaching is that some people need maybe they're not quite at that step of like leaps and bounds and taking action into the next step of life. They really need to sit with processing trauma or understanding their own kind of inner workings and dynamics. Maybe there are some diagnostics that need to be worked on. And so I think it's important to have like both of them show up. One of the things when I first, you mentioned Lisa Jenkins that we've both worked with. And when I first met with her, one of the things I said was that I feel like there's a big misconception that coaching is therapy and therapy is coaching. And I think they are different. And I think they each have their place. It's really just a matter of figuring out, which one does someone best line up with where they are right now in this moment,
So yeah, I tell people all the time, like as a coach, like don't mistake me for a therapist. One, because there's a whole lot of legality there, right?
Yes.
So I gotta be careful, and I tell people all the time. Here's my heart. I think that everybody can benefit from having a psychologist, a mentor, a life coach, a therapist. Whether it's in phases, whether it's different stages of life, like everybody's on some kind of journey. But I think the clear indication is that every hero of a story always has a guide, and so we always want. I guess friends aren't always going to be available, as I tell people. So just pay somebody to help you out a little bit. Like we pay somebody to go to the gym. Sometimes we need to, we need a little bit more. It's kind of like nutrition, right? Like a nutritionist can give you practical tips to be healthy eating from a more medical standpoint, but like a personal trainer who's a trained nutritionist is kind of just going to give you kind of the basics and stuff. And so encouragement to anybody, if you are looking for one, feel what's best for you. You may feel like you need to go to that psychologist, but find out things are just a little bit minor, or think. There could be some major things. Don't get me wrong. There could be some major things, but I think we all need that guide, and so it's important for you to figure out which guide you have.
Absolutely. I did actually see Bailey asked a question. First of all, she said she likes my combo words. I do make up words. You're welcome. That's kind of a thing I do. I just sort of figure out a way to combine two things together into a word that may or may not exist. So you're welcome. But she also asked, are there any specific examples of when life coaching would be more appropriate than traditional counseling or therapy? And really, I feel like it comes down to kind of like an inner judgment call, of sort of what type of service are you looking for? If you feel like you're looking for more help with like symptom management, feeling like there's a lot of deep-seated stuff that either you aren't aware of yet, but you kind of know is beneath the surface, or maybe you don't even know it's there, but you have like a general sense that there's probably some stuff down there that needs to be kind of pulled out and looked at. That's sort of how I see the therapy process. And like I've said, different people approach this different ways. So this is just kind of my take on it, right? The way I see the coaching is that when I am kind of doing a consultation with someone to figure out is therapy or coaching best for them, we'll have a conversation about what are they actually looking for from the treatment. Are they looking for an action-oriented plan of, here are some things to go do, and then I kind of become hands off and let them go do? Or are they looking for more of a long-term kind of weekly or twice a month or once a month kind of relationship where we set some smaller goals potentially, or we start to work through things at whatever pace works for them? What I've noticed even in my own seeking both therapy and coaching is that coaching has always seemed to give a bit more of that push into action that therapy doesn't always bring to the table for like a good reason, right? We're not trying to have people go through things too quickly, because there is a lot of value that can come from just sitting with what you're experiencing and letting yourself process it in whatever ways you need to. And so that might actually, be better served in a therapy environment, because it's going to kind of allow for more of that space. And then that's where it also allows, for the potential to, talk about some diagnostic things if need be. Whereas from a coaching perspective, and Brry, you made a good point. There's some legal stuff there. And, coaches are generally not sitting there trying to diagnose clients. They're not sitting there, trying to process unprocessed stuff. It's more about taking what is there and using it as a springboard into the next level of living. And that's sort of the way I delineate the two. I hope that makes sense. It's definitely
makes complete sense.
Okay, good. It's one of those things.
Yeah, I'm following you. I think you explained it very clearly. Bailey said that that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing your perspective. But I know your big shebang is kind of more couples and stuff. And so I kind of want to get into that. And so I guess the biggest thing is when it comes to relationships, what do you feel like is the biggest thing you have? Some people say honesty. What I'm learning right now in my life is probably more clarity.
Okay.
I think clarity. Because you can be honest all day long, but it doesn't come out clearly, and it doesn't always come out nice. So what would you say is the number one thing that all couples should have?
Healthy communication. It always comes back to healthy communication. And you actually kind of touched on it by saying like clarity and honesty, like that's all kind of rolled into communication. But for years now, I'll have people that go, oh my God, you're a sex therapist. What does that mean? What do you do? And my answer has almost always been, I help people learn how to talk to each other about what they want. Because so frequently we have a lot of thoughts internally. We have a lot of, inner dialogue, or maybe even we have great conversations with our friends about our relationship, but we don't actually have those conversations, what I call courageous conversation, with the people that we should be having the courageous conversation with. And I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it's easy. It's not, and it's hard. And at the beginning stages of learning to develop good, healthy communication, sometimes it feels a bit rocky. I've definitely had couples that go, oh my gosh, we're doing everything you're saying, and it feels like we're like fighting all the time. And it's not so much that it stays at that point of fighting, but when you start to dredge stuff up that maybe you shoulda, coulda, woulda said and you didn't, now it just sits there beneath the surface and it starts to fester into resentment. And so the more that we start to dig into that barrel of resentment and bring whatever those courageous conversations are to the light, it can be a bit rocky at first, but it's also a really rewarding process to see the other side of it, where all of a sudden we're not having silly arguments about who's going to take the trash out. We're not holding it against the other one if they squeeze the toothpaste tube wrong or whatever it may be. And I use those examples because you would be probably, well, maybe not amazed because you do some work with life coaching. So I'm sure you've heard some of this, but people are often surprised to hear that those, like what I call in the weeds arguments and discussions, it's like we're not really talking about the thing beneath the thing that really needs to be talked about. So then we find ourselves annoyed at how our partner does, fix a sandwich or, take the trash out or whatever. And so, so I spend, I would say, about 90% of my entire career, coaching, therapy, doesn't matter, working with people on how to kind of fix and align their communication so that it works for them, not against them.
I like how you brought that up because one of my good friends, I just went to him and I'm like, hey, I need you guys as, brothers, as friends, to be honest. Like, do you guys fight with your significant other? You guys fight with your wife? Because to me, it's so easy to think that other people don't fight because we don't put that baggage out there. And, we'll talk about that in a sec, like boundaries and stuff. Like, we don't have to share everything with each other. But I think it is good for people in relationships to see healthy examples of good fighting, good communication, because the whole dynamic of relationships is you having two individuals, some are more stubborn than others, right, are trying to come together and like live life with each other. And when you have your house a certain way or a certain way you want to be it, and they have their house a certain way that they want to be it, it's not the same house. And so the layout plans are overlapping. And so you have to have that really good, strong foundation to build up those walls in the room in the way that you guys jointly agree on. And so people often butt heads because that's a good thing because they're trying to live out an individual life. But there's a responsibility in a relationship that we're not just looking out for individuality, we're also looking out for our togetherness as well and kind of merging both of the worlds together. So it's all about worlds emerging and stuff. But one thing that he said is he was talking about an argument they were having about, I guess, the dishes or something. And he said, it's never about the dishes. It's never about the dishes. And I'm like, yep, that's true. It's never about the trash.
Occasionally be about the dishes. I'm not going to say it never, never, never. Like if you truly aren't, like let's say one person's just never doing the dishes and the other person's always doing the dishes. Okay, it might be a little bit about the dishes, but it's really more about the effort and the feeling of, kind of mutual, like taking care of things in the relationship and a feeling of balance and not feeling like all the responsibility is like falling on one person to take care of household chores or whatever it may be, because that can become a burden, and it can start to feel like taken for granted or, just not appreciated or, not really grateful for, and so I think it shows up in lots of ways. But the way I'll even kind of tie it into the sexuality side of things is that if we don't have good, healthy communication, and we know that healthy sexuality is kind of an extension of healthy communication, it's really not uncommon for someone to say, wow, we don't have this, great sex life that we want. And as soon as I start asking the questions about communication, it becomes very clear that they're not only talking about sex, they're not talking about anything in a healthy, courageous way. There's a lot of superficial talk and there's a lot of kind of throwing stuff back and forth at each other, but not actively listening to where the other person is coming from. And so then it kind of devolves into this, this resentment of nobody's feeling heard, nobody's feeling listened to, and then nothing actually like develops in a positive manner at that point.
Yeah, I think it's important that we, I think, I mean, just any here when we're talking about like word views, there's no secular word view. There's 7 billion people, so there's 7 billion different word views,
Mm-hmm.
and here you have two different word views that are colliding together to
Mm-hmm.
make sense. And it seems like in relationship, it seems like I'm right. I'm at this place saying speaking one language and they're on another language. And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we try to cram it into like Google Translate, but even in Google Translate, it's still getting lost in translation. And so that's why I was saying like clarity is super important because it's not just a responsibility of me to communicate well, it's also a responsibility of me to communicate well to where they understand whether or not they speak my language or not.
That's a really great point. And actually, like you're like totally hitting on the reason I have created this online relationship communication workshop, because the way I describe it is this, and you did a great job. I love it. I'm just going to add another analogy in there. You know, when you're in the car or you're trying to listen to the radio and maybe you're in between stations, so you hear like bits and pieces of one and bits and pieces of the other. It's like if you're delivering a message on one frequency, but they're picking it up on a different frequency, you're missing each other in that translation. And so what tends to happen is that then you don't feel heard, you don't feel listened to, then you take it personally and you start to hold on to it as like a reason that your feelings are hurt. And so then in the midst of trying to have a conversation, you start to just throw everything at one another. Well, you know, you didn't listen to me that one time and I asked you to take out the trash and you didn't do it. Well, really, what's going on there is that you didn't feel like the effort was being put in, or you didn't feel like they really heard your request and, you know, honored it and made you feel taken care of, or it was just a feeling of balance being off. And rather than being able to have that conversation in the moment, we let it fester and then it blows up. But I like your idea of the languages. I think we all do speak our own kind of version of a language. And it's not about having somebody in our lives that completely gets everything about it automatically, but it is about learning how to communicate your language to your partner and vice versa, so you can really understand where they're coming from. And really all that is the practice of empathy. You know, that's actually what my blog was on this week, was the whole concept of what is empathy. And it's the ability to just sit with someone and go, can you tell me about your experience? Can you give me some insight into what it is that makes you tick in the world? Like, what is it that, you know, gets you out of bed in the morning? Or what is it in this very moment that's hurting your feelings or making you not feel cared for or tended to or loved or whatever it may be? And empathy is a skill that we can develop. We can learn how to get better at it. I don't know that any of us are great at it at the very beginning, but I think the more we practice it, the better we get.
Practice makes perfect, right?
Well, okay, I'll go you one better. I used to say that, but I am a recovering perfectionist. So I like to say practice makes it better, because then at least we're not striving for perfection. We're allowing ourselves to strive to make progress. But I totally get where you're going with that.
Okay, I'm not exactly 100% on board with that saying. I mean, we can break down the differences of why it's not, but I mean, I like where you're going.
Yeah.
What did you say one time? Practice makes it
I
better.
like to say practice makes it better. Yeah. Or practice makes us, or what did I say the other day? Practice makes progress. I've said that before too.
Okay,
You
there you
know?
go. Practice makes
Mhm.
progress.
Because I really
Uh,
do feel like, you know, we're in this constant evolution of getting, you know, becoming a better version of ourselves, you know, and that's the reason that, you know, yes, I work a lot with couples, but I also, within the confines of that, do a lot of work with people trying to get them to individually look at themselves a bit and kind of turn that mirror back on themselves to be able to see, like, well, what's reflecting back at me? You know, what am I projecting onto my partner? And what is that saying about my inner needs and my inner wants and things like that?
um, I like how you also bring that up because, and this is going to lead me to the next question, is when I talk to people about relationships, especially married people, it seems like there's this cycle, right? And I don't describe it as an easy cycle. I say it's an uphill cycle, right? And here's why it has to be a cycle, is because we start off single, and then we start dating, and then from dating we get engaged, and then we're married, and then we have kids. And so mostly people take those as steps. And then so when you take steps, you finally, you had kids, you're done, you whatever, and it kind of gets dull from there. But the reason why I say cycle is because when you're single, it's a great place to be single. Very empowering place to be single. But when you're dating, you can still be single, not in the sense of like, go, free for all, but you can be, you can still work on yourself, but also have a sense of togetherness. And then you can still be engaged and still be dating. That's why dates are so important. But also, you can repeat cycle one with the singleness of working on yourself. And it's not so much as just working on yourself because there's like a lot to fix. It's also recognizing that we are forever evolving in our lives from the experiences that we take in daily. And if we don't allow ourselves to process those and even share those, then oftentimes it seems like you wake up 5 years later and you're like, I just don't know this person anymore. Or we're not on the same page. And so, yeah, that's why I say it's an uphill thing, because you got to keep on pedaling uphill, because the moment you stop, it's gonna go bad for you.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to imagine, like, here's two people that start like this, and as they grow apart this way, sometimes we have to stop and pause and see, how can we look at each other again? We've kind of gone down this path of splitting, but we need to come back and kind of reset. And I talk about that a lot, this whole idea that you're never stuck. You are always able to hit that reset button. And no matter how far down that path of separateness it feels like it has gotten, there really is a path to one another. Now, I will say there are times where someone, and it's been a very infrequent thing, but where a couple might come in and say, we really have tried to look at this from all angles, and we're just not sure if we are compatible anymore. And so I do want to honor someone's experience and not ask them to stay somewhere or stay in something that's not working for them. But I will tell people when we meet, if this doesn't end up working out, then you're going to know that you have looked at it from every angle and you have objectively tried to decide what is best, rather than just reacting emotionally, making a very quick decision that's very final and not being able to come back from it, And so I wish I could say that it was like 100% success rate, because that would be amazing. But I do think that any of the times where it hasn't ended up working out for the relationship, they end up being able to split, not being angry and carrying a lot of baggage with them wherever they go next, because that's also toxic.
So let's talk about, I'm trying to get the boundaries, but you mentioned baggage, right? Oftentimes, people who are in relationships, they feel either one side feels like it's their need to fix the other person. And or that person feels the responsibility that I have to fix, I have to be this person's savior. And I just tell people all the time, like, y'all just need Jesus, and just need to be yourselves, So because I don't feel like you can hope fix somebody, but you are not directly responsible for whether that person gets successful. And I think that's where you're kind of hitting on with baggage, because that's what if you don't resolve the baggage in your singleness and you bring it into the next relationship, it catches up. And it's not just about you guys dating, it's about the 4 other people you dated before,
Right. Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I think it's this idea that, if you don't unpack that baggage before you connect with someone, you're going to start unpacking it with them or on them or in their stuff. And that gets real messy. Again, it can still be worked out and figured out, but we have to get really curious when we find ourselves being emotionally reactive, or we find ourselves having a really, really intense emotional reaction to something. Rather than just, flying off the handle at it, we can learn how to kind of pause and go, okay, what am I reacting to? What's coming up for me? What am I noticing? Does this make me feel like I'm in a different time or a different relationship? Or does it remind me of something that's kind of triggering me emotionally? And that's where we start to develop a lot of emotional maturity, where we're able to kind of call ourselves on our own stuff. And we also can develop a language within a relationship where the partners can kind of check each other. Not in a way to be scorekeepy, because that doesn't work. If you keep score, nobody wins. But there is a way to be able to kind of be like, hey, you seem a little off today. Is everything okay? I'm just checking with you, not you did this and I'm mad at you and how dare you, because that doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, oftentimes I feel like men, when, gender roles, I feel like, this goes both ways, but I'm just talking about my experience as a man.
Sure.
Even as a coach, and as a person who's always been very solution-based driven, is oftentimes in the communication when something's brought up to me, it's like, okay, how can we fix that? And it's not always like I'm telling you to tell you, not because I want you to fix it,
Exactly.
So that's a whole another side of that thing.
Oh, yeah, that happens a lot, where one person is saying one thing or the other person is constantly in fix mode. And I'm guilty of that too, because I do like feeling like I can fix things. But, if it's friends or family or my significant other, they don't always want me to fix them, and it's important to be able to kind of check yourself and be like, okay, do you want me to be like the therapist or the coach, or do you just want me to listen? Do you just want me to sit here and hear what you're saying and kind of validate that it's okay to feel that way, And I think all of these things kind of fall under what I would call like relationship best practices, learning how to develop these healthy lines of communication that allow everyone to, have a voice. And even if you don't agree on everything, that's also okay, but we have to be able to disagree, respectfully. We have to be able to sort of check in with each other and be like, this is just one of those topics that we just don't really agree on, but that's okay. I love you in spite of that. And we're just not going to sit here and try and change the other one's mind. Even that idea, when someone says, oh, no, I'm going to change them or I'm going to fix them in a relationship. Behaviorally, and, emotionally, there can be some small changes that we learn to make, and we can learn new skills and put them into practice. But the core of who we are, the things that we hold as our values and our morals and our, the compass that guides us through our day, those things are generally as they are. There's not a lot of shifting to that core stuff. So if I have two people in front of me that are like, oh, we have nothing in common, but we'll just figure it out. Okay. And that may work. I'm not saying it can't, but it could be a little difficult at times if we are constantly trying to fit square peg in round hole. That's going to start to feel kind of at times. And maybe there are some solutions that can keep it from breaking apart. But I think it's the reason that having healthy, authentic communication from the get-go is so important, because I will also sometimes talk to people that'll say, well, I didn't really tell them everything about myself. I want them to get to know me first, and then I'll tell them the bad stuff, which judging it as bad, I don't think is helpful. But I also don't know that keeping your deepest, darkest secrets to yourself for 6 months and not sharing any of those details is also the best idea. We need to be able to have some of that come to the surface, because then you're both able to evaluate what's really here. Not, oh, I'm going to fall in love with one version of a person and then I'm going to find out who they really are after I'm already kind of invested. And that's a little bit of an interesting practice also.
So I think we decided that conflict can make or break a relationship. But it's not just about the topics of the conflict, it's how you handle the conflict with one another.
Yes.
And oftentimes you always aren't going to see eye to eye on conflict. If you want an apple and they want an orange, like, don't go get them an apple. Like, just let them have their orange.
Right. Right.
And and I think, I've seen some very successful relationships where the people are polar opposite. We're talking about like different political parties
Mm-hmm.
to different religious values and stuff, and they make it work. And I've seen people who are like almost the same people. That's kind of a little more weird to me, and that's why. And that's why I feel like conflict is good, is because you're not dating yourself. It would probably be the best benefit for you to find somebody who's completely like you and likes the same things as you, but then you'll wake up and realize, wow, I'm just dating the doppelganger of myself. They look different, but they're like me. And so I think it's important, especially when you're going through conflict and establishing boundaries, it's not just it's not saying you don't have to absolutely not care about what somebody else is going through. Have good conversation. Like if they like giraffes and I've never liked giraffes, like I can make it clear, like, hey, you can talk about giraffes, but I'm not going to give any attention to it because I don't understand the obsession with giraffe. But even one step further is I don't have to completely care about giraffe, but it would be a great benefit for me to kind of sacrifice myself and listen to a conversation or two about giraffes, or buy a giraffe, for the one I love.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think that it's important to have togetherness, things that we share in common that we can connect on and, enjoy. But that even if we don't share all of the things in common, that we can support the other one where they are, and that kind of goes back to that empathy thing and just being able to understand someone for the person they are, not who we want them to be. And I think that shows up a lot, especially once that kind of newness of a relationship wears off and that new relationship energy is not there anymore. It gets a little harder to keep some of like that magic alive. But I think that's the reason I like the concepts of things like, date your spouse or keep the dating alive, or coming up with creative ways to still connect and have conversations about things, because you may feel at some point, wow, we've had every conversation we could ever have. And that's not true, but yet it can feel that way, or things can feel a bit stale, or it can feel like maybe there's not a lot of interestingness that's kind of going on. And so I think it's just this whole big picture, of learning how to have these fully functioning relationships with two individually fully functioning people coming together and saying, we want to connect our lives, not feeling like one person has to complete the other or vice versa. So it's, if you want to imagine, we've got two independent people. The goal is not codependence where they're so overlapped that there's no separateness, but rather interdependence where there's enough overlap to keep them engaged and hooked together, but there's also enough separateness to allow them to still have their own individual time, be it just, interests that are different, or, being able to go for a run or a walk, or have some self-care on your own, or I like to go do bubble baths, or whatever. It's just kind of that idea that we don't have to spend every waking minute together every day for it to be a good relationship. And in fact, I'm not going to say that never works, but sometimes that's too much togetherness. We need some of both.
Yeah, I think it's important to have your thing and their things. And one thing I just see a lot of young couples or new relationships doing is they start like blocking out all their friends because they get into that new relationship. Like, oh, I'm hanging out with so-and-so and stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody like get married and I just had to pull them aside and say, because they were like they were engaged, like they were going to get married, like they were going to spend the rest of their lives with this person, hopefully. And yeah, I really do hope. But I was just like pulling them aside and saying like, hey, like you're about ready to marry this person. There's like a forever there. You're not always going to have your friends around. and you're still gonna have to like learn to like have your boundaries with your single friends or your other friends. Like you obviously can't go and like party all night anymore, or just go out of town for a 3-day weekend and say, see you on Monday. Like those things have to be planned and scheduled accordingly, because we're about to go into boundaries. But I think it's important that, like I said, remember those cycles and continue to do that. And I like what you're saying, an interdependent rather than a codependent. Or so yeah, I think that's great information you gave, and I was hoping my commentary was necessary.
No, I think it's helpful. I feel like, not only is there not just one approach to this that is the only right one. I think having multiple perspectives, even the whole concept of like when somebody asked earlier, like picking a therapist or picking a life coach, whatever, I think that there, you almost need to sort of interview the people that are going to help you and get a variety of perspectives. Don't feel like one person has all the answers, because I think that's kind of what makes life so beautiful, is that we're able to see what resonates with us. And then we're able to kind of pick those things and start to learn how to apply them to who we are, so that we can have that really, like that life of our dreams or that relationship of our dreams, and feeling like we are living our best and not feeling stuck.
So one thing I asked earlier, like, what is the most important thing? I think you and I agree on this, and this, I think you explained it in the coaching program we are part of so well, is about boundaries. And I mean, I read the book. I think it's just called Boundaries, and it's by Dr. Henry Cloud and stuff. Anyways, I think boundaries are good. You can have self boundaries. You can have communicated boundaries with your family, and believe it or not, you can have boundaries in a relationship, because some people think like, oh, I made my best friend, so I gotta share everything with my best friend, and that's not true. Like, you can still have boundaries within a relationship, and boundaries are perfectly healthy. So going back to that, oh, I just need alone time, I just need time away. Okay, let's schedule that and get you there. Just don't disappear, and
Absolutely.
So could you give a little bit about boundaries and how that ties in?
I mean, I feel like I could probably talk for like 6 hours on boundaries. So I'll give you the small version. We can always like have a part 2 if we need to. I don't want to overwhelm people. But yes, boundaries in their simplest form, the way I like to think of it is that setting boundaries is a way for you to love yourself and someone else well. It's a way for you to be able to say, here are my needs. Here are the things that I want to do with my time, with myself, with my life, whatever that looks like. And it's okay for me to assert those things, but balance really is the key. If someone says, well, I don't want to, give away any of my personal time because that's my time. Okay, so that's a time boundary. And there's a variety of ways that boundaries show up. And the way that we choose to spend our time and who we spend it with and what we spend it doing is absolutely part of figuring out boundaries. Sometimes in a relationship, though, we have to make sure that not only are we adhering or kind of like honoring our self boundaries, but that we're also kind of honoring the boundaries of what the relationship needs. So maybe I'm someone that I'm just going to use like, and for instance, because this isn't really me, but I'll just use an example. Maybe I'm someone that needs a lot of me time. Okay, maybe my partner is someone that needs a lot of together time. So a way that I might set a time boundary would be that if I know I want some individual one-on-one time with myself, maybe I set my alarm an hour earlier than I have to get up. Now, is that going to sacrifice some sleep? Maybe, but is it worth it to me to get up and have time to read my book and drink my coffee and, watch the birds outside or whatever it may be? And that makes me feel good because I'm getting that kind of recharge time. Then that would be a form of setting a healthy time boundary that still allows you to spend time in your relationship with your significant other, but you're also making time for yourself. Right? So I'll just run through them real quick. I always forget one, but we've got emotional boundaries, intellectual boundaries, physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, material boundaries, and time boundaries. Oh, did I get them all? I think I got them all. I think there's 6 that I normally
think you got them all. Yeah.
I think I did. Yay. And they show up different for different people, you know. If it's from an emotional perspective, it's, you know, what do I need emotionally from a partner? What does my partner need from me? How do I assert those needs, and how do they meet them, and vice versa? Sometimes it's also about information sharing, and this kind of goes into the intellectual also, like, what happens if we have a difference of opinion? Am I able to share my opinion, even if it's different than yours, and it not create World War III in our relationship, but we can still love and honor and respect each other? But I don't belittle you for your opinion. I can agree to disagree. I can tell you, you know, I really don't see it that way, and here's my point of view. But the minute I start trying to change your mind to match mine, or I start trying to tell you you're wrong simply for not agreeing with me, well, now we've turned the corner and we're no longer looking at it through a healthy boundary lens, you know? And the boundaries really do overlap, and there might even be more examples than the 6 I listed, but those are the big 6 that show up a lot. And then, of course, you know, things like sexual boundaries. I have couples all the time that will come see me, and it's a really interesting process when one person has more of an interest in being sexual and intimate than the other. I call that a desire discrepancy. I'm not sure I coined that term. That's just what I refer to it as. And when that happens, it's not uncommon for someone to think that they're going to walk in my office or have a Zoom call with me, and I'm going to all of a sudden tell them that they have to go have lots of sex with their significant other. And, you know, not only would I never do that, but that's a sexual boundary, right? It's a physical boundary, but it's also a sexual one that says, maybe I don't have the same desire as my partner. Are there some things that we can do to try and get that more in line with each other? You bet there are. But that doesn't mean forcing anything. That doesn't mean asking someone to sort of disregard their own internal boundary need for the sake of someone else, right? That's not a way to love yourself and someone else well. That's a way for you just to basically forego what you need to make someone else happy. Physical boundaries, although yes, they include sex and sexual expression, they also just include things like, does one person like to cuddle and the other person doesn't? Is one person real touchy-feely and the other one isn't? Do you share like a couch cushion watching TV, or are you on completely opposite sides of the couch while the television is on? Sometimes it's just about figuring out the physicality of how you interact with your partner in a non-sexual way. And then material boundaries would be anything that we would look at in how we treat money, how we treat stuff. This is where the boundaries of you didn't take the trash out or you didn't do the dishes really do come into play. And we can have that, you know, that healthy discussion about, you know, I've worked with a couple, and one of them would say, you know, I have, you know, but I understand this because I have OCD, but, you know, she would say, I have clinical OCD. It really just makes me feel crazy if there's a bunch of piles of stuff all over the place, and literally he comes in from work and puts piles of stuff all over the table. And before I know it, I want to like scratch his eyes out, but I don't want to do that because I love him, but yet it's driving me crazy, you know? And so we had to have some conversation around not only the importance of setting a boundary, but then verbalizing that you're setting a boundary so that it's not just, you know, you think someone knows or you hint around at it. Like, hints don't work. I sound like a broken record sometimes saying that to couples because they're like, well, I kind of hinted at it. Stop hinting at it. Just let's be direct. Like, let's talk about it, you know? And then finally, I should say, material boundaries also include how you treat and use money. Some people would say money boundaries is a whole separate thing, and I totally get that argument. And that's a big piece sometimes of couples dynamics, is figuring out, you know, how we treat money and finances. And there are boundaries that all of us sort of bring from our own upbringing and childhood and experiences with money that will sometimes emotionally get in the way of those conversations. And then we have the time boundaries, you know, like I mentioned that one at the beginning of like, how do we spend our time? What do we do with our time? How much time is too much togetherness? Is there such a thing? What if we're really on different ends of that spectrum, you know? But boundaries really are a way for you to teach someone else how to treat you. And not that you want to set a boundary and be that person that's like, no, I will not listen to anything other than what I just said, and you're just like digging your heels in kind of a less than helpful manner. But it also needs to be asserted. So there's like a balancing act of how do I learn to have these courageous conversations around what are my boundaries, how do I set them, what are the things, and what do we do with that, you know? But yeah, boundaries are a lot of fun.
They're a lot of work.
Oh, look, it looks like we got a question. Okay, someone said serious.
Yeah. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. We're going to get to that question.
Okay, we're holding.
I just want to wrap it up with boundaries because
I
think this question's very interesting. Okay. And I have to make a huge statement because I think my grandma's watching this. So, anyway, hold on. So here's the last thing I want to say is Townsend and Cloud. I feel like the good representation of boundaries are breathable, right? They're not saying that they show a physicalness, but they're breathable. Like you can breathe through them. So it's not just a brick wall. It's not just like, bam, this is the way it's going to be.
Yep.
But it's a way like, hey, can you see through? Can you see where I'm coming from and why I need this and stuff? So breathable, and it's not just very transparent. Like, I mean, then it wouldn't really be a boundary at all. It'd just be like this imaginary line as a land survey, you know?
That's a really great way to say it. I like people to think about, you know, an emotional fence that they put up around themselves, and a chain link fence lets a lot of stuff in and out, and it's not gonna like keep you real protected. But like you said, like concrete wall, or I like to say like a 10-foot brick wall with like a moat in front of you, that's going to keep everything out. Now, nothing can get in. But then what we really want to strive for is having like an 8-foot privacy fence with a gate that we hold the key to, so that we get to determine who we let in or out, what we let in or out in terms of an information flow. But then we also have the ability to go, okay, I'm locking the gate. I need a break. I need to push back a little bit. And so you have a lot more privacy and the ability to filter things.
I like that. I also like how you put a moat. Now I'm thinking about a Black Knight keeping him at bay.
Right. I mean, I get it. And sometimes we might want that level of protection, but I'm not sure how well that works in relationship land, because I think it ultimately, it just gets a little bit too like intense or too strong to the point where we're not actually, we're not letting anything flow.
Okay. So we're going to get to that question now, because there are a couple of things that I actually want to ask you as a sex therapist. Okay. And I know we live in America where sex is kind of like a taboo topic, you know, and we don't really talk about sex, you know, and I think I heard from somebody before, like there's 3 things that you don't talk about when you're at a guest in somebody's house. You don't talk about religion, you don't talk about sex, and you don't talk about, you know, the third one?
Politics.
Because politics, yeah. Mm-hmm. And my goal is to always be a person who is compassionate and listening. Mm-hmm. And to do that, I have submerged myself in kind of erase that idea of taboo. Now, there's some things that I don't feel comfortable with talking about. So sex is not one of them. I've been a sex educator for years, and I tell people all the time, it's not rocket science that people are going to have sex, and that's why abstinence-only programs don't work. As much as I could be an advocate for an abstinence program, it doesn't hit hard. And if you don't think teenagers is having sex, like you're already missing the point. Like you're not getting it. So I talk about sex, and I can talk about drugs and rock and roll, not in that particular order. But I want every viewer to know, like, there is no topic that I would not talk about, or I would just admit that I'm uncomfortable, and I would leave it up to the experts. But since you are a sex therapist expert, sex right now, my friend who was on last week, he's a licensed counselor. I'd love for you to connect. But he said, serious sex question for a sex therapist. Mm-hmm. I've had this posted for me before and wasn't fully able to respond. Okay. How do you respond to this question? Mm-hmm. What do I do? My wife has never orgasmed, and we both feel frustrated with sex. Mm-hmm. And then he follows like, this is a very intimate question. So hold on. So thank you for answering that. I think I have an idea, which is like sometimes I feel like we do put too much of a sex importance on relationships, and then it's taboo, so we can't really talk about it with people, and it's different. Like it's not a one size fits all. It's kind of 7 billion view. That's kind of where I think this question is going, but I would let you take it away.
Sure. No, I totally agree. I do think that, the number one libido killer that I have seen, well, actually there's two, is anxiety and pressure, and not pressure in a fun way, pressure in a like internal, not enjoyable way. Essentially what happens is that there's a couple of things. One of them is that, like you said, sex is usually a relatively taboo topic that, although I feel like we are trying to make some strides to make it a more normalized thing to discuss, especially in less of a private setting and more of a public one, we still have some work to do. And because of that, I feel like we live in a very hypersexual culture that's very like afraid to talk about sex. And so there's not a lot of great like sex education models that we follow as a whole society, right? There's different factions of like, well, we're going to teach this over here, and then we're going to teach this other thing over here. And so I think there's a couple of things at play. Now, without knowing the specifics of this couple, I will say that it's not uncommon for someone to seek my services to then say, I've never had an orgasm. And after we do a bit of, back and forth discussion about what are they actually experiencing and, kind of what the dynamics are of what's going on, I would say in about 70%, maybe even more than that, of cases, they actually are having orgasms, but they had an expectation that an orgasm feels different or is different than it actually is. And I feel like that's where the lack of education really gets in the way, because if people are expecting one thing, they're experiencing feelings that feel like this other thing, they start to question themselves and think that their pleasure they're experiencing isn't real, or it's not good enough, or it's not what they expected it to be. So now they're discounting it as like unimportant or not happening. Now, that does not mean this is true in all cases, right? So it is possible that in the case that that's being talked about, that someone is really truly not experiencing an orgasm. So the thing we have to do in that case is to take the pressure way down and to stop expecting that an orgasm is the only appropriate outcome of a sexual encounter. The more that we can decrease the level of pressure and expectation and just focus on the actual pleasure of being together, the more fully enjoyable it's going to be for everybody. Because it takes it out of the realm of this like race to a finish line, and it turns it more into an enjoyable experience where everyone is actually being able to just take note of what they're feeling along the way, and not like shaming themselves or being angry with themselves if they don't reach the outcome that they were looking for. Now, again, I'm speaking in generalities. There is specific nuanced details to every single case. So I do not want someone to hear this and think that what I'm saying is 100% going to work for them in their relationship, but it's a good place to start, okay? The other thing is that if someone truly is experiencing difficulty orgasming, this is where I get a couple to go back to the drawing board and to almost imagine what it would be like to be exploratory with what could work. We may try 87 different positions. We may have them incorporate toys or the use of something else that could be an aid to help. We might look at, are there, like pressure in a good way? Are we using the right kind of pressure? Are we actually engaging in enough foreplay so that both people are achieving pleasure at the same time? One of the things that's very interesting, specifically about male-female dynamics, is that the average length of time it takes for a man to go from the beginning of a sexual encounter to orgasm, now this is an average, is somewhere about 3 to 5 minutes in general. Women take somewhere between 18 to 22 minutes to reach that same point. So what tends to happen a lot, and this is what I find in my practice a lot, is that he might be done. She isn't. So now she's in her head thinking about the fact that she's not done. She's focusing on the fact that she hasn't had an orgasm. And so rather than just enjoying the process and continuing to try and stay connected, her thought process is pulling her out of the moment. She's no longer thinking sexy thoughts. All she's doing is thinking about anxiety and frustration and pressure and expectation and beating herself up about it. So that's going to make it less likely to happen. So that's kind of like a long way of explaining it, but I wanted to be as thorough as I could because I feel like this question comes up a lot. Now, if it really is truly, the second scenario that she's not having an orgasm, it might take a little longer to figure out the solution. The first one of, probably am having an orgasm, but just didn't realize it. That one's a little easier to sort of wrap someone's head around because it takes, they have to get out of their own thought process of what they thought it was supposed to be or expected it to be. And then there's a variety of other ways that we could talk about enhancing the experience so that it's not so hypergenitally focused and it's more focused on the experience of the full body experience rather than just, okay, we're naked, let's touch genitals and hope for the best, because that's what happens a lot.
Sorry, I'm laughing because somebody said, what did I just walk into? We are having healthy conversations about sex and answering good questions. And I guess the last thing that I want to know, I guess, about sex is my married friends, they kind of take this like poll and like reaching out and stuff. And it's like, how much sex is good sex for a relationship? And I tell them, I think it's different. I think you have going back to that topic of like, we have two individuals. Somebody may be like, hey, 7 days a week. Other person is like, kind of want once a month. Mm-hmm. And so there may need to be a compromise or boundaries or something. But if you can answer that question, I know that's great. And sorry, Dave, if you just walked in at an awkward moment, but we were talking about sex.
Dave, I will assure you, I have been told that I am very good at making sexual topics not sexy. So hopefully it won't get to like, oh my God, but there you go. You're welcome. So to answer your question, I do agree that the desire of individual people is going to vary from person to person and relationship to relationship. So I don't want anyone to hear what I'm about to say and then judge themselves as less than or more than or whatever. And I don't want it to become a thing where you're now holding yourself to someone else's expectation. But I will say clinically, in my decade and a half of doing this work, being able to have a couple engage in some form of erotic, intimate, or sexual play at least once per week is kind of a gold standard. And there's a reason for that. It's because any more than that is kind of gravy on top. So yay you. Any less than that, and the potential for the erotic energy to get a little stale or to potentially kind of not wither away, but maybe atrophy a bit, almost like a muscle that you don't work out, it'll kind of atrophy some. It doesn't mean it can't be regained, right? The progress that's there, if we've had a dry spell or if we've had some, a lot of life events going on and it doesn't feel like we've been able to sort of connect, it doesn't mean that there's not a way to reset that. But yeah, a lot of times I will tell people, I'm like, even if we're starting with the only thing that feels comfortable is to, have like a cuddle session or, to engage in like a daily 20-second hug, because there are some erotic, intimate things that occur when someone engages in a hug like that. Maybe that we get to the point of doing some, back massages on each other, or maybe we sit there and make out on the living room couch. It doesn't always have to be overtly sexual to really count as an intimate connection. And so I think that's really where I get people to start, is looking at how frequently are we being intimate. And intimacy is also directly related to how well are we communicating with each other in an authentic way, so that we do feel comfortable to share deeper levels of intimacy. And that's why sex and communication are so tied and interlinked together. But yeah, generally I get people to figure out how far from once per week are they? And then we kind of evaluate. If they both say, yeah, about twice a month is what we do, and we're good with that, then there's really no problem to fix, right? There's no reason to fix something not broken or that's working for both people. It's really only worth evaluating, should we change something if someone's not feeling fulfilled, if there is a big desire discrepancy, or if there's been a lot of rejection or changes that have happened that have led to one person saying no a lot, and now the other person is kind of in that I don't want to be rejected anymore, so now I'm resentful. That's the kind of work that needs to be done at that point. But if it's working for both people, it doesn't necessarily have to be changed.
I like that, because you're establishing, like, even though I'm the expert, there can still be that curveball that if it's, you know, you have kids and once a month or once every other month is working for both parties, good.
Fabulous.
That's not good. But if there's a miscommunication, you're saying that it's not just about, it's not the physical act. Sex doesn't mean intimacy, and intimacy doesn't, they overlap.
Correct.
But it's more important to, and I'm just trying to follow you to make sure I'm hearing you, is like, it's more important to establish intimate moments simply as a hug, or maybe like a dance in the kitchen, you know, put some music on, or a candlelit dinner.
Sure.
It's more important to experience those things once a week, more than actually doing the bang bang.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's like if we start focusing on the quantity of something versus the quality of the interaction, well, then it starts to feel like something on a checklist, you know, like, oh, did we have sex this week? Yes or no? And what does that tell us? It doesn't tell us a lot if we're not looking at the full picture of communication and the feelings behind everything, and what life events might be going on that are causing, you know, any discrepancy to occur, which is why I think the more that couples can just communicate about what they're feeling and what they're experiencing and what they're needing and wanting, the better. I will say too, I think sometimes that hyper focus on sex can almost add pressure. You know, I worked with a couple, the names have been changed to Protect the Innocent or however that goes. But, you know, and it's funny. She's told me I can use this example, but she said, I'll never forget. I got home from work. My husband was in the kitchen. I gave him a kiss on the cheek. I go to the bathroom. I come back and he is in the kitchen. He has taken all of his clothes off. There was nothing in me kissing him on the cheek that was even kind of insinuating I wanted him to take all of his clothes off right at that very minute. Like nothing at all. And so all that did for her was add a bunch of pressure of like, oh, okay, now I have to come home after a long day. I can't just greet my husband with a kiss on the cheek because he's going to take that in a whole different direction than I was intending. And now I feel this added pressure that if I say no, or if I, you know, hey, not right now, no thanks, that's going to make him feel rejected. So then it puts her in this place of, what do? I don't want to reject my husband, but I also am exhausted and would like to take a shower or whatever. And this just, I don't feel super sexy at this moment. And so I think that's the reason it's important to have some understanding of where your significant other is coming from when it comes to incorporating sexual intimate time into your relationship, especially if there has been kind of a dry spell where there hasn't been a lot of interaction. We're probably not going to go from 0 to 100 like that. You know, it's not like we're going to go, okay, we've decided we want to do some more sexy stuff. Ready? Let's go do it right now. Like it just doesn't work that way. And it usually takes a little bit of, you know, point A to point B to point C to point Q. I mean, it takes a little bit to get there. And so I think the more that we can just allow space for that to show up, the better.
Awesome. Well, we kind of are going over time here. And so I would just want to, I think this is all great stuff. So maybe we can work it back in to another episode in the future.
Absolutely.
Love having these open dialogue and conversation and stuff. But what I ask my guests every time before we leave is, what 3 things can you offer right now to encourage people whether it's this week, whether it's this month, whether it's in the relationship, whether it's in their singleness, or
Okay, so the three things, first of all, is that you are enough exactly as you are, and you do not owe anybody you changing who you are, right? That is a definite. You are never as stuck as you think you are, and no matter how far off the path you may feel like you have gotten, you always have the ability to pause, reset, and realign into a direction that you want to go. And if there is any questions that come from this that people want to ask, I am very easy to find all over social media. Go to my website, send me a message, whatever you want to do. I try to make myself as available as I can, but those are the three things I would probably leave you with.
Well, Lindsay, thank you very much for joining us today. I feel like you are the Dr. Ruth of St. Louis. So
I'll take it. I like that. Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
But yes, thank you for your time, for your input, and thank you for educating us on stuff. Maybe save some marriages out there. Anyways, last question is, how can people reach out to you if they have any more questions? And I can send them your way.
Sure. So the easiest way, if you go to my website, it's lindsaywalden.com. I think my name should be showing up on the screen. It's Lindsay with an AY. So lindsaywalden.com, you can find my blog, you can find my podcast, you can find more info about kind of who I am and what I offer. On Facebook, I'm at Lindsay Walden Consulting or at Lindsay Walden Therapy. On Instagram, I'm at This Is Lindsay Walden. On Pinterest, I am at Therapy Thoughts. And on TikTok, I am at This Is Lindsay Walden. So I am literally all over social media trying to put bits and little details out there all the time to help.
So question now, this is, does your, I just have to ask because it's hitting my mind. So I have to ask, does your website smell like sex and candy? Is it like
Oh, that's awesome. You know, I don't know how to get that whole smell-o-vision thing yet. But I do try to put as many resources on there as I can. I don't have that technology figured out yet though.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just thinking about that song. The number one song that comes like when I'm thinking about sex is like the Marcy Playground song, you know. That's funny. Sex and Candy. It's a good song.
It is a good song.
I listen to it often. And but anyways, I just thought I would ask that. But once again, thank you so much for being on this show. People, if you have questions, please reach out to Lindsay Walden at lindsaywalden.com, and all of her information will be on that site. You can also look her up on Facebook, TikTok, and all that jazz and Raz. And but once again, from me, Brry, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for being who you are, and thank you for giving us a lot to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right, everybody. I will see you next week. We're going to start doing these episodes on Wednesday, and I will start finding more guests. If you have anything you want to talk about, let me know. Be my friend. Be my guest. Thank you. Love you. Good night.